Okay, and we are back. So, and you don't, here's something very important. You don't necessarily need to have every single one of these steps. And I think that's a mistake people make sometimes. In fact, some of the steps are more like a choice, more like choosing between a couple of different options. You could have one, you could have more than one. You might even not have any of them necessarily. But the most fundamental things are this idea of going and coming back, going to some other place or some other state of being, and then coming back to the previous state with a new kind of wisdom. And if you're thinking that might sound a little bit like Jung, yeah, I think that's the lines that we should be looking on. Jung says, when you start to understand your dreams in more depth, then you discover things about yourself and you can grow as a person. Campbell suggests that we're doing the same thing over the course of our lives. And that myths kind of help us go into that other realm, into that place where we can experience growth, because they tell stories of people who went into that other place and experienced growth. Okay, but let's look at the specific steps. How does it all begin? Well, it has to begin in the ordinary world, right? So let's start there. How do you go from the ordinary world into the world of adventure? For that, you must experience the call of the hero. So this is kind of like what they call the inciting incident in a story, something that reaches out and shakes you out of your ordinary life and gives you something to do, gives you a question to answer, a quest to go on, a problem to solve. This is the call of the hero. There you are in your ordinary life, and then adventure comes and says, "Hey, wake up! Something's happening here." So something mysterious is going to happen to the hero. The hero, our protagonist, encounters something like a message or a visitor, a call for help, a problem that needs to be solved. Kind of reminds me of what Prop was saying about the hero having a problem that needed to be solved. But it could also be a call for help, some sort of reason for the hero to go on a journey. So something is going to interrupt the ordinary life, and that is the call. And that's going to call the hero away from ordinary life and into the world of adventure. And Star Wars gives us a great example of this, which is Princess Leia, her message appearing to Luke. Really, it's for Obi-Wan Kenobi, but the projection of the message is played by R2-D2, and she says, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope." Well, now Luke has a question to figure out and a problem to solve. He knows Mr. Kenobi, he knows Ben Kenobi, and now he has a question. He has this puzzle to figure out. Why does this lady want Obi-Wan Kenobi? Is he going to get involved? So on and so forth. So Luke receives the call of the hero, and Luke starts off in his ordinary life, working on a farm. Now, you don't have to work on a farm to be in a hero's journey story. That would kind of be the cliche where people are drawing on Star Wars a little too much. And even, a guy who works in an office, person living in a small town, any of us who's just kind of living an ordinary life, that's where we could be at our starting point. And then some kind of call comes and changes our life. That's what would be in the story for a hero. And in our own lives, it would be pretty similar. But as Joseph Campbell says, it's always possible to refuse the call. Now, this is another place where people sometimes get confused. I've seen a lot of people think that the refusal of the call is a necessary step for every hero. It is absolutely not. It's just an optional step. It's an optional step because the hero, when you get this message that something important is happening, maybe you're really attached to your day-to-day life. And you think, oh, I couldn't possibly go on an adventure. I couldn't do that. I couldn't be a hero. I couldn't do anything like that. So you might just think that you can't go on the journey, or you're not supposed to, or you have something else that you're supposed to do. Usually it has something to do for a hero with fear or expectations that are placed on them by society. But, as Campbell says, when you refuse the call, it usually turns the adventure negative. So if you start dragging your feet and refusing to go on the adventure, you're in trouble, because you find that things aren't working for you. because where were you? You were in the desert. You were in the place where things are dried up and feel meaningless. The ordinary world isn't enough. That's why the call came in the first place. But if you sort of refuse the call, then you're stuck and not wanting to go on that journey. But not every hero has to do this. Some of them just leap both feet in and are like, yeah, I know my world's all weird and sort of empty and like a wasteland. I want to go on the journey. I'm done with this place. I'm done with this town. I want to get out of here. I'm gonna get the heck out. Um, uh, and if we look again at the example of Luke Skywalker, he is one example that people turn to for the idea of refusing the call, but it's one of those things where it's kind of gotten blown out of the proportion a little bit. He only refuses the call for about 5 minutes, right? So here's his story. He has this call to adventure, and he does go out after R2-D2, and he finds Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then Obi-Wan Kenobi tells him about, all this cool adventure stuff and how he could have a part of it, and his father was involved in it. And then Luke says, I wish I could, but I really can't. I have to help my aunt and uncle on the farm. So that's his refusal of the call. And then, just like Campbell says, it converts the adventure into its negative form. Bad things happen, in other words. So Luke goes back to the farm, and he finds out that his aunt and uncle have been killed. I've heard some people call this part, or this idea, the call knows where you live. Like the adventure is going to get you if you're dragging your feet. Basically, something's going to happen to make you go on the journey anyway. And this is kind of like Jung's enantiodromia, his idea of running in the wrong direction. Basically, when you repress stuff in your life, when you keep it sort of stuck in your subconscious, and you don't let it out and you don't acknowledge it, because that's really what this journey is all about, your own psychology, then you're going to experience problems. Stuff's going to burst out. You're not going to feel happy. And so that's what the refusal of the call is all about. It's not really that the gods know where you live. But the call may return again and again until it is answered. Or maybe it turns out that one person couldn't answer the call, but a different person could. So maybe it'll go to a different hero. But I would describe the refuse of the call as more like a fork in the road, because many heroes do embrace the call. So I would say it looks something more like this. You could just go straight on to your adventure, or you could refuse the call and go back. You could refuse the call, but the call will drag you back into the adventure anyway, because it's something that you need to do. So it ultimately ends up being kind of a loop here. Okay. But I'm going to say number 2 is step number 2, once we get past the question of whether you're going to refuse the call, is crossing the threshold. So this is the act of leaving the ordinary world, the everyday world, and going into the world of adventure. Some people, like I said, some heroes very much want to cross the threshold. There might be threshold guardians. These are, beings that you have to fight or confront or outwit or defeat to get across to the other side, to get to the world of adventure. You may have to solve some sort of obstacle. Or you may have help from a mentor. For Luke Skywalker, this is very much Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan helps him at the, helps him with the Jedi mind tricks, and he also helps him negotiate the deal for their ship and everything. So Obi-Wan's the guide to the world of adventure and lets Luke in. And Luke also has help from Han Solo, who gives him a ship. So that's the kind of figure who can make the crossing possible. But sometimes the crossing happens before the hero's even aware of it. The hero just kind of gets dragged across. That is the whole call and start of the adventure all in one. Bam! You get in another world. You're dragged into another world. Now what you're going to do? That's your problem to solve. When you have a helper who's getting you across, there's a term for supernatural aid. So supernatural aid, you might need that kind of aid to get across the threshold. So maybe a magic spell or some magic words or a magical friend or partner, something like that. But getting across the threshold is a very important step because now you are in the world of adventure, the world where you can change. And of course, a great example of crossing the threshold is Frodo in The Hobbit. Sorry, not Frodo. What am I talking about? Bilbo, of course. Frodo's in The Lord of the Rings. Bilbo in The Hobbit, where he decides to go on an adventure. At first, it seems like the dwarves are not gonna, are gonna make him go on the adventure, but he ultimately realizes he has a choice, at least in the movie version, and he decides to go on an adventure because he knows that there's something important about doing that. It's going to lead to something that he needs. Oh, here's some great examples of Threshold Guardians. Campbell often thinks of, for Threshold Guardians, like the sort of monsters that you see guarding temple gates. They're guardians to a threshold too, right? They're guardians to the realm of the god. So you get past these kind of obstacles or enemies, and then you can get into the world of adventure. And these guys have kind of an opposite thing going on with an open mouth, a closed mouth. So sometimes you need to make a choice or go between two extreme paths, something like that. And there's a lot of stories when it comes to mythology where you have heroes who have to defeat some sort of monster at this stage. Okay, once you're in the world of adventure, you experience what's known as the Road of Trials. So the course of your journey is going to be solving sort of tests of skill or bravery or wisdom. And when you overcome them, that's kind of you demonstrating your right to be a hero, that you are finding what's needed. Now, these might be things that help you grow as a person. These might be things where you solve a problem nobody else could solve. And at this point, you can still have helpers and mentors as well. Yeah, we describe these as helpers, people along the journey. So Obi-Wan Kenobi types, mysterious old men in the forest, Rumpelstiltskin type of people. In props terms, these would be the helpers and donors, right? So these mentors, mentors might be a good word. The sort of wise old men, the guides who help you along your way. These people can help you do the road of trials, but you may have to do some of the trials on your own. And these could be anything from, test of your intelligence to fighting monsters as the sort of classic heroes do, any of those sorts of things. Okay, at a certain point, the hero is going to get to the dark night of the soul. The hero is overcome by doubt and by frustration and are struggling with an obstacle that seems impossible to solve. So if we said that the hero's journey is kind of about going into the subconscious to confront all the things that you've repressed, like Jung says, then this is the point at which you've gone the deepest into the woods, and you're wrestling with the biggest problem that you needed to solve. And one symbol of this in the stories a lot of times is the hero is imprisoned. The hero is tied up. This is sometimes the abyss is another word for it. This kind of void, this darkness. That is this sort of terrible place where the hero may be locked up and struggling. But actually, this is exactly where you want to be, really. Because if you are able to overcome that ultimate obstacle, then you are going to get the ultimate victory. You're going to win in a way that is really significant. So why do you have to solve the biggest problem? Because you're going to get the biggest reward, the biggest result from solving that problem or confronting that monster. This is what it's all about. So when it's a story, usually this is where we interact with the theme of the story. We find out what everything's about. We find out what we're trying to say with it all, So the Dark Night of the Soul, it's very important. Okay, and what happens after that is you have a revelation of some sort. But I'm going to get into a description of the different types of revelations a hero might have. I'll get into that in the next video.